And I want to thank everybody for joining us today and coming together here. Those of you that are coming in later actually had a little bit of an advantage because we've already volunteered you for something. But I'm actually going to get everybody up. I'd like to have everybody stand up real briefly if you've ever attended one of these events before. All right, appreciate that. Will you remain standing if you've been to 3 or more of these events before? 5 or more? 7 or more? 10 or more? Have you been to all 13? All 13. Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you for that support. And for all of you that this is your first one, you're in for a treat. This is a conference that I really enjoy, and it only comes around every 3 to 4 years. There's a lot of information that gets exchanged here, so this is a wonderful time, and welcome. A couple of housekeeping items for us. If there is an emergency, if we have to call 911, call 911. If we have to evacuate, we'll go right out by the registration desk. There's a set of stairwell. There's a stairwell there. We'll go out those stairs and straight out. We'll get you outside. This direction is north. We're going to rally or muster in the north corner of the parking lot up there off of McDowell Street in the corner of the parking lot, should we need to evacuate this building. In the app for the conference, there is safety information in the app loaded in there. If you have any questions, check the app or the registration desk and we'll take care of you there. So if something does come up, please make sure we're aware of it and we'll get everybody taken care of. Those of you that are in from Canada, I want to say thank you. For those of you that are not aware, today is the Canadian Thanksgiving. So our Canadians that are present here had to make a choice between whether they spent time with their families or with their environmental family. So thank you, Canadian, for being here today and wish them happy Thanksgiving. It really is an honor to be a part of a gathering like this where we come together to share ideas on the environment, understand our impacts on the environment, and the awareness associated with how we walk through our daily lives and what we do for our jobs and what those impacts are and how we can do better. This is a conference where we can get some tools, some training, some education that we can do our jobs better and think about doing them differently. So I challenge everyone to learn something new, meet someone new, and embrace yourself in a new environmental opportunity. So I enjoy the show. One other piece of housekeeping for everybody, if you have a cell phone, please silence it. If you do need to take a phone call, please step out for that phone call. Since we are an environmental conference, if you can police your space after each session, if you have trash, if you generate trash or see trash, please make sure it gets into the right receptacle. This whole event is made possible through the generous support of our sponsors and our participants. So I want to thank our sponsors for having us here today and putting this all together, as well as recognize our diamond sponsors in Duke and Corteva. Appreciate all their support. Let's hear it for our sponsors. Thank you. Representing Corteva is Travis Rogers, and I'll turn it over to Travis.
Well, good morning. On behalf of the program committee as well as the steering committee for the ROW13 symposium, I want to welcome you all here to Charlotte and also to the symposium that we have going on this week. Looks like we've got a really good forecast as far as weather goes. I know if you're from the south, you probably brought your jackets. If you came from the north, you might have brought your shorts and t-shirts as you've all adjusted to the weather. But this is a great fall weather for the southeast, so I'm excited about that. Just as a reminder, kind of the purpose of this meeting is really to provide a forum to get together and to talk about the environmental impacts associated with siting, constructing, using, and maintaining rights-of-ways, as well as draw together and publish practical information on the environmental impacts associated with using these rights-of-ways. And as I was thinking back, this symposium started somewhere between 40 and 50 years ago. I don't know the exact date, but I think it was in the mid to early 70s. Is that right? 76. Okay. So as I think back, I wasn't very old at that time, so that's exciting to say that. But as I look in the mirror and see more and more gray hairs, but this, I can anticipate at that time when this symposium was started that environmental concerns as it relates to right-of-way management may have been considered more idyllic than what it is today, and maybe more of a contingency of folks that had a strong interest and passion around environmental stewardship and things of that nature in land management. But when I look at where we are today as a society and as an industry, it's really become more and more mainstream, and I think that was even evident as we look and see how many folks have attended all the way back since the beginning of this symposium and where we are today. So I'm excited there's a venue such as this to get together and talk about environmental issues and how we can help address some of those. Also want to call out for those of you that were able to come in early yesterday, and I know sometimes it's a big ask to come in on a weekend like that, but I want to thank our local host, Duke Energy, specifically Scott Fletcher, Tom Johnson, and their team. They did an outstanding job with the tour for those that were able to participate in that. We really didn't have to travel more than 30 minutes from here in the city of Charlotte, and we really got to see a wide variety of things, kind of a really good overview of their program. And we went to a nature preserve, we went to a hydroelectric station, as well as a nuclear station switchyard, and we also had some of their subject matter experts from their vegetation management program present to really answer questions and talk about what they're doing and how they're doing it, and some of their opportunities and challenges associated with their program, but a very first-class operation for sure. So thank you all for that. Again, we've got a very diverse group here this week. I encourage everybody to take advantage of networking, meeting new people, and spending time in the exhibit hall, looking at some of the exhibitors that we have and vendors that help support the industry and provide a lot of solutions to help us do our jobs and do them safely and in a way that's environmentally practical. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom Johnson with Duke Energy. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for being here. We began this journey to bring this summit, this symposium together years ago, it feels like. A little global pandemic was put in our way, but we persevered through this, and I'm very happy to be here, very happy to represent the local planning committee that put this together, and proud to represent today Duke Energy and our UVM and our IVM program that we have here at Duke, a very long-standing tradition in our stewardship of our rights-of-ways that we have here. So I want to welcome you all to Charlotte, and thank you very much for being here. And I would also like to take this moment to introduce the Catawba Indian Nation. I believe this is apropos. Today is actually Indigenous Peoples Day, if you're not familiar with that, so that is today. So I wanted to introduce the Catawba Indian Nation. I'm very happy to have them kick off our symposium this morning. A quick word about the Catawba Indian Nation. This area where the Catawba River is their ancestral home. They have lived along the lands, along the banks of the Catawba River, dating back at least 6,000 years. So before contact with the Europeans, it's believed that the nation inhabited most of the Piedmont area of South Carolina, North Carolina, into areas of Virginia. Early colonial estimates of the population was around 15,000 to 25,000 people. Quite impressive. So please give me a warm welcome as we welcome our friends from the Catawba Indian Nation.
Tanaka ni temp, niat Delesslin Evans George Warren, niat ni temp Ru, nya Casti Plyler Hore, yinyat Isware, yinyat Katabare, Hawokuri, Hawo, Manu, Hawo Wapit, Hawo Iswan, Yankampin Sawacha Hore. Hi. My name is Delesslin Evans George Warren, but everyone's just called me Roo, like kangaroo, since I was a little baby, so please feel free to call me that. I'm joined today by Casti Plyler, who is one of our amazing dancers, artists, and princess of Catawba Nation. And we are going to share a little bit about Catawba Nation, a little bit about our history, and I've also been instructed by Deanna to wake you up a little bit, so I'm gonna do some interactive stuff. So hold on to your seatbelts for that. So when I introduced us, I gave some thanks to the land and, of course, the river, which Tom was just speaking about. The river, which connects the mountains, the beautiful Appalachian Mountains, down to the coast, which along the way brings us many beautiful things, fish, water, and, of course, the clay that we've made our pottery from. The 6,000 number is from of how many years we've been here, 6,000 years, is from archaeologists who find evidence of our culture in archaeological sites like pottery, right? And pottery is something that we've done without stopping for all of those years. Today we teach it to our kids and even teach it to adults like me who didn't learn when we were younger. And today I want to share a story with you. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a song while Casti teaches you a little bit of a dance. But before we get into the story, I introduced myself to you all in Catawba, which is our language. And I said Tanake, which is hello. So now it's your turn to tell us Tanake. So everyone say Tanake. Okay, it sounds like 8 a.m. on a Monday, possibly a Thanksgiving. Tanake. Okay, good. Now stand up. There you go. All right, so everyone point at the ceiling, point at the floor, point at Cassidy, point at yourself, point at your neighbor, point at your other neighbor, point at the ceiling, point at the floor, point at the ceiling. How many fingers are you holding up? Dupine. Dupine. Good. Next one. Nong puri. Okay, so close. With nong puri, it's a nasal sound at the beginning. So hold your nose. Nong puri. I love this. I want a picture of this. Dupine. Nong puri. 3. Namina. Parapuri. Paktari. Dupine. Nong puri. Namina. Parapari. Paktari. Number 6, which is my second favorite number, Deepkura. Oh, that's so good. Most people go Deepkura, which is wrong. Deepkura. Good. Wasisiniya. Dabusa. Dapine. Nampari. Namina. Parapari. Paktari. Deepkura. Wasisiniya. Dabusa. And my number 1 favorite number, number 9, Wongcha. Close. You have to make a little break in the middle, so it's Wongcha. Very good. And then 10, Pichine. Okay, and now I'm going to teach you the song that we teach to our little kids so that you can remember it, because I imagine you haven't memorized it yet. Okay, so repeat after me. Dupine, nong puri, namina, parapuri, pakturi, deepkura, wasisinia, dabusa, wongcha, pichine. All right, so now we're going to sing it together, so you're not going to repeat after me. And as we're going to go, we're going to start off real slow. It'll be very easy. You'll do it perfectly. And then we're going to get a little bit faster as we go. All right? Everyone good? Everyone good? Okay, good. Dapine nong peri, namina paraperi, pakteri dipkura, wasisinia, dabusa wongcha, pichine, a little faster. Dapine nong peri, namina paraperi, pakteri dipkura, wasisinia, dabusa wongcha, pichine, a little faster. Dapine nong peri, namina paraperi, pakteri dipkura, wasisinia, dabusa wongcha, pichine, a little faster. Dapine nong peri, namina paraperi, pakteri dipkura, wasisinia, dabusa wongcha, pichine. One more time. Dapine nong peri, namina paraperi, pakteri dipkura, wasisinia, dabusa wongcha, pichine. Good job. Woo! You can now sit. There will be a quiz at the end of the conference. So like we mentioned, we have evidence of Catawba culture going back 6,000 years. For us, the exact year doesn't matter because we have stories about the beginning of the world and all that good stuff. One of those stories that happened right after the beginning of the world involves Rabbit, who shows up a lot in our stories, causing tricks and causing other things to happen. So one day, Rabbit is sitting near the river where he always sits, and he's surrounded by all these beautiful trees and this beautiful valley. Beyond that, everything was dry. It was like a desert. And one day he sees this light, like a lightning bug, up in the hills, up in the mountains. And around them are these big, terrifying shadows. So Rabbit decides, I'm going to investigate. So he starts hopping up the hill, and as he gets closer and closer, he sees that it's actually a little fire, like a little star on the ground. Surrounding this fire are buzzards, right? Can you imagine big buzzards sitting around the fire? Now, when he gets close to the fire, he realizes it's warm, and that night was very, very cold. And so he gets closer and closer, and he says, Tanake, Mr. Buzzards, can I please sit next to your fire? Please, I'm so cold. And they said, no, Double Wonk, no, Rabbit, go away. So he hops around to the other side, and he says, oh, buzzards, please, I'm going to freeze out here if you don't let me sit by the fire. Please. And they say, no, Rabbit, go away. You're bothering us. So he goes back to the other side. He's thinking, what can I do? So he gets little tiny pieces of wood, and he sticks them in between his toes. And then he says to the buzzards, oh, if only I could just warm my foot next to the fire, please. I promise I'll leave you alone. I promise. And the buzzards say, okay, fine, Rabbit, if you will leave us alone after that. So he takes his little foot with the wood in it, and he sticks it very close to the fire. And what do you think happens? It catches on fire, right? And he says, yes, I got the fire. And then immediately says, oh no, I got the fire, right? His body starts to burn up, and he starts hopping. Oh no. So he starts hopping down to the river, hop. He finally jumps into the river, and he goes, oh, thank God, right? He turns around, and what does he see? The entire woods have been caught on fire and are burning down. Oh no, what have I done? I've burned down everything, our beautiful valley. So First Woman, who's the only person there, comes up to Double Wonk and says, Double Wonk, what happened? He says, oh no, I burned everything down, everything's down, no one will have anything to eat, what are we gonna do? And so she says, no, Rabbit, look. So he turns around and he sees the valley where everything had burned, and in all that darkness there, all the things that have been burnt, he starts to see small green things popping up, new life coming into the land. And there, the Weedabuye, the deer, eats the green things, and he says, oh, this is the best I've ever eaten. Now, when I first heard this story, I couldn't figure out what the heck it was about, right? Why this story about fire? Why about him burning things down? And then the part at the end about there being new green things, right? Well, the reason why is because Catawbas, like many indigenous communities, practice controlled burning, right? Maybe you see some of the remnants of this in burn piles in yards, right, in the fall, particularly down here in the southeast, when people gather together their leaves and set them on fire. But Catawbas and lots of other communities all the way to the West Coast were using these sort of sequential, controlled, low-grade burns throughout the landscape. And in doing that, it clears out the scrubby growth, the small plants, the new trees, and leaves behind some of the bigger ones, right? And this is why many of the explorers to this area and others called it something like a Garden of Eden, or a park, like a manicured park that they had seen near the kings and the wealthy people in Europe, right? And so this is what was actually the primary biome here, not the dense forest that we think of today, but what was called the Piedmont savanna. And in that savanna, there was a lot of incredibly diverse life, including a lot of plants that Catawbas and others used. One of those plants is a type of sunflower that grows, but it has tubers, sort of like potatoes that you can eat. If you've ever had a sunchoke or a Jerusalem artichoke, it's related to this plant. Nowadays, this plant's called the Schweinitz sunflower. It's the only one listed on the Endangered Species Act. But the reason I wanted to tell you this is because I saw that this is a right-of-way symposium. And what's interesting is that this plant, it can grow in clay soil, it can grow in horrible heat, very little water. The one thing it can't deal with is the woody overgrowth. So for this plant, for the Georgia aster, and for some of our other medicinal plants, one of the few places we can now find them are in the rights-of-ways along the road today. So recently, a few years ago, we worked with the Department of Transportation. They were doing a bridge renovation project somewhere near the reservation. In doing so, they were going to need to dig up some of these Schweinitz sunflowers, right? Many of those, all of those came back to the place, but in the process of growing them in pots at the South Carolina Botanical Gardens, they also reproduced and multiplied, right? And so we were able to bring some of those plants actually back to Catawba Reservation and have the Schweinitz sunflowers growing for the first time in a long time. So I encourage you when you're doing your work to think about not just what the landscape looks like now, but also what are the longer term situations of the landscape that we're in. What are the things that tribal communities can bring to that knowledge? What are the plants and the specific biomes that we're trying to protect in our work? I want to say hello to Diana and everyone else in your conference for setting this up and inviting us out. Let's give them a round of applause. Great. And now we're going to end with a friendship dance. So this is a traditional dance for us that we do when we have gatherings. It represents our unending circle of friendship. And Cassidy, do you want to come and talk about it a little bit?
Kanake. I'm Cassidy. So I grew up here on the reservation. I've been dancing since I was about 2 years old. So all the stuff that I know, I come to share with you, I've known my whole life. So this dance was brought to us. It's a celebration of our friendship, like he said. As you see, we'll start off in a circle, and we'll intertwine multiple times and pass by. As you pass by each other, you want to say hello and greet each other. And this is to represent that we hope our paths cross many times in our lives. At the end, we will come back out into a circle and count to 3 and run to the middle and scream as loud as we can until he stops singing, because I'm sure there's other people doing important things in the building. We can't disturb them too much. So at the end, we do that to celebrate our friendship, and that we hope that it never ends and that we will meet you again. There's not a word in our language for goodbye. We say kate till we meet again.
So as you can tell, there's only 2 of us, and I got a drum and I can't dance. So we need volunteers to come and join us. We invite all of you, come and join us. Get your steps in early. Yes, 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 come on. Cassidy will not bite you, I promise. We fixed that problem. Yes, okay. Good, and start making something approximating a circle. Good. Now hold hands. Yes, getting close. Very good. Now, you got to keep holding hands the entire time. The only place where people are allowed to break the hand holding is where? Right there, okay? And everybody's going to follow Cassidy, so you're going to follow the person right in front of you, and you're going to keep going, and yeah. This will be like a kindergarten test, right? Follow the leader. Hawo Kuri, thank you so much. Thank you all so much. Great job. Let's give it up for our amazing dancers who have won a very special prize for participating, the prize of unending friendship. And on that note, Tanake, Hawo, Kate, we hope to see you again. While you're here in town, our reservation is just 30 minutes south of here if you want to come and visit our cultural center. And then if you live in the area, November 19th, when? November 19th is the Yapnya Iswa Festival, which is our annual celebration of being Catawba. Everyone's invited, lots of good food, lots of beautiful dancing and music, and lots of beautiful things that you can buy from our artists. So, Hawo, I hope you have a great rest of your conference, and thanks again for having us out.
That was amazing. And Rue and Cassie, before you leave, I feel like we should have had you on our field tour yesterday because we actually saw some of those very plants you're talking about on our rights of way. The sunflower, Georgia aster, as we protect those, yes. Awesome. Thank you so much. That was amazing and much more than I'd bargained for, so wonderful. All right, so hopefully you now all got your blood flowing, everybody's energized and ready for our keynote address. So it's my pleasure to bring to you Harry Sedaris from Duke Energy. Harry's got more than 25 years of experience in the energy industry. He has served as our Chief Distribution Officer. In this role, Harry oversaw the safe, reliable, and efficient operation of our electric distribution systems for our company's 6-state area. That's Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. He has previously served as the state president for Duke Energy's utility operations in Florida, which serves approximately 1.8 million electric retail customers. Prior to that, Harry has served as our Senior Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety. In that role, he led the groups responsible for developing and advancing corporate policies, programs, and strategies to ensure the company's compliance with environmental health and safety laws and regulations. Harry also has earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Chemical Engineering from NC State University. He also has a Master's in Business Administration from Campbell University, and he's also completed the Advanced Management program at the University of Chicago. Harry is also currently a trustee of our Duke Energy Foundation and is also a board member of the Association of Edison Illuminating Companies, as well as he participates in the North Carolina State Natural Resources Foundation, Incorporated. He's also on the National Utilities Diversity Council. Harry grew up here in Asheville, North Carolina, just a short ways from here, and he and his wife have 2 daughters. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Mr. Harry Sedaris.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tom, for that introduction. And I think we should start off every Monday with that kind of dance. I feel energetic more so than ever on any Monday. So it's a pleasure to be here with you guys today in Charlotte, North Carolina. I welcome you to our headquarters city, my home state. As Tom mentioned, I grew up in Asheville. I grew up camping, enjoying the outdoors. So what you guys do every day is very near and dear to my heart. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about Duke Energy, our strategy, and then tie it together with what you guys do in terms of right-of-ways, permitting, environmental, siting, those type of things. They asked me to talk for an hour on right-of-ways. I don't think I could do that, so I'm going to try to tie it all together. So I'm going to start off with a little background on Duke Energy. Some of you may know this, some of you may not, but we are headquartered here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're a Fortune 150 company. We are one of the largest energy companies in the world, actually. And we have 8.2 million customers across 7 states, both gas and electric customers. We have 28,000 employees that lead this company, and they're spread out all over the land here as we manage this. We got our start. We talked about the Catawba River, and I think y'all were close to the Catawba River yesterday. Over 120 years ago, when Dr. Wiley decided to harness the power of the Catawba River by damming it up just south of here in Charlotte, and using that power from the hydroelectric plant to power the cotton mills here in town. And from that grew into what we are today. So the Catawba River that the Catawba Indians valued so much for 6,000 years was really how we got our start. As you can see, our service territory here covers Indiana, Ohio, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. And then you see that little spot around Nashville, Tennessee. We have some gas customers there. What's not shown on this map is we also serve 22 other states with our renewables business. So we have windmills in Wyoming, Texas, California, solar plants all throughout there in Oklahoma and other states as well. We have over 10,000 gigawatts of renewable energy that we generate. We are also, and I'll talk about this a little later, on track to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which is our overarching strategy. So I want to talk a little bit about our strategy. I'll break this up into a couple of buckets. The first one is the overarching strategy, which is net zero by 2050. That's to reduce our carbon emissions from 2005 levels to be completely clean by 2050. We'll be at 50% by 2030, 80% by 2040, and then 100% clean by 2050. As part of that, we break that into three key components. One is the grid, preparing the grid, making sure the grid is ready and enabled to handle all this new clean energy, and how we're going to manage that. It's going to be very different than what it has been in the past. Obviously, the transition from generation from coal and natural gas to more cleaner sources like wind, solar, nuclear, and other clean sources that haven't come out yet, that they're still working on. And then the third part of it, which is really underlying the whole strategy, is what we do with our customers. They're at the center of our strategy. We got to make sure that they are brought along equitably, affordably, and reliably is what we call it, to make sure that they have the clean energy and the reliable energy they need to power their lives. So we'll start by talking about the grid. So I said 120 years ago, we started out with a hydroelectric plant just south of Charlotte and grown into what we've grown. We got 314,000 miles of transmission and distribution lines across our territory, the largest T&D system in the country. That needs to be upgraded. That has served us well for the last 120 years, but the things have changed. So we're having more frequent and more violent storms. We just went through a hurricane here recently in Florida last week and here in the Carolinas. We're seeing hotter weather, polar vortexes, colder weather. So the grid needs to be more robust, more resilient to handle this changing weather environment. Our customers have also told us that they want something more from the grid. The grid used to be, I won't call it dumb, but it was in essence dumb. It started at the generation plant, went through the transmission system, and then came to your house with one-way power flow, very simple to operate. Now people are buying rooftop solar, they're buying electric vehicles, power is flowing back and forth from the house back onto the grid, from the grid to the house. The system was not designed to do that, so we have to upgrade that to be able to do that as people want to adopt new products, new services on their house, on their rooftops. We have to ready the system for that. Customers have also told us that they want more control. They want to be able to know what kind of energy they're using, when they're using it, and how their behaviors can help them be cleaner, help them save money. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So this graph kind of shows the continuum of where we were for about 110 years of the 120 years, and probably in the last 10 years, we've been working on that middle section of how we enable, how we make it stronger, more reliable, more resilient. And then where we're going to is this future where what we call the green-enabled grid, where we'll be able to seamlessly move power back and forth. We'll have generation assets at the grid edge in people's homes. We'll be able to use people's electric vehicles for the grid when we need it, when it's really hot, when it's really cold. We'll be able to manage when they charge those vehicles. So that's going to be a big change for us. And these are some of the things that we're doing to the grid to get it ready for that future state. Obviously, we're upgrading equipment, and I'll show some pictures in a few minutes that'll show you why we need to do that. But this is both to grow capacity. We're very blessed that we're in some of the fastest growing states in the country, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina. Everybody is moving here because we got beautiful weather and a lot of economic activity here. We're installing what we call self-healing technology. This is technology that works just like the GPS on your car does or on your phone. So imagine if the power goes out here for some reason, this will automatically sense that and then reroute it around there just like a traffic jam and be able to serve power from a different source, reducing the amount of time that people don't have power. So last year alone, or this year to date, we've saved 850,000 hours of outages using this technology. So that's great because when people lose their power, it's really impactful to their lives. We saw that even more during the pandemic. So people were at home working. A lot of people still work from home. We were seeing people have school at home. Obviously, they were eating at home. So it became really more critical in terms of reliability. Batteries are going to play a big role in the future. So we're installing batteries on our system. to be able to store the clean energy that's generated during certain times of the day when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, and be able to use that at night or when the wind's not blowing to be able to manage the load. That's easier said than done. Battery technology is good. It's lithium technology based now. I think in the future there's many other chemistries and technologies that are coming out that'll be able to handle that differently. Longer durations, be able to charge and discharge quicker. So we're looking forward to that, and we're doing a lot of testing in that area. Enabling the two-way power flow. Like I mentioned before, for 100+ years, power flowed in one direction. Now it's flowing back and forth. During certain times of the day, we will be taking power off somebody's solar roof and using it at other houses. At night, we will be putting power back on there. We will be discharging batteries to help those customers. Then the final thing is what we call energy orchestration. It's how you manage all that to make sure that people don't show up at 6 o'clock when they get home from work and they plug their electric vehicle in right as the sun is setting, right when everybody is cooking, all the kids are home from school, and the usage has gone really high. We need to manage that load. We need to make sure that we are not charging the cars at that time. We wait till later when the load comes down to charge at that time. So we balance the clean energy sources with the demand and make sure that that is seamless across the timeline of the day. So we call that energy orchestration, how we're going to orchestrate all our customers' energy to balance that load to make sure that we're providing the clean energy when they need it. The other thing I mentioned is our overarching strategy is to get to net zero. So I'm going to talk a little bit about transitioning how we produce the power. So for many years, we started off with hydroelectricity. We added coal and oil-fired generation. Then we started building nuclear facilities. We also started natural gas facilities. So that kind of makes up the mix of what we had. Obviously, coal is not the cleanest resource on the planet. It generates lots of carbon. Nuclear is clean, hydro is clean, wind, solar is clean. Natural gas is cleaner, not completely clean, but cleaner than coal, about half the emissions of coal. So we've been working since 2005 on this trajectory to get to net zero by 2050. We've retired 7,500 megawatts of coal so far. That's 53 coal units. What Tom didn't mention, I used to run a lot of those plants. So it's every plant that I pretty much worked at has been shut down and tore down. So I don't know if I'm it's sad to watch those videos sometimes of all the work that went on in those places, but it's progress. We've built 6,000 megawatts of renewables. Most of that is solar energy across our states. There is some wind energy in that as well. And we've reduced from that work 44% of our carbon emissions since 2005 to this point. Like I said earlier, we're going to go to 50% by 2030, 80% by 2040, and then by 2050 we'll be at 100%. You've probably not heard all these terms a lot. Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 emissions, Scope 3 emissions. We like to count things. Scope 1 emissions is what we generate. So think about when we burn coal, that is a Scope 1 emission. So obviously we're going to reduce that to zero. Scope 2 emissions are things that we buy power from other producers and making sure that that's clean. So we're going to reduce that to zero as well. And then Scope 3 is upstream or uses of our product. So think about mining coal or drilling for natural gas, the emissions that come from that, that's a Scope 3 emission. That's going to go to zero. You think about our gas business, so you have the emissions that come from producing natural gas, but you also have the emissions from when you burn natural gas in your fireplace or on your stove, water heater, those sources. And we're going to reduce that to zero as well. And I'll talk about how we're going to do that in just a minute. So you can see a very, very aggressive plan of how we're going to go from what we were emitting in 2005 with how we were doing that to where we're going in 2050. So this graph shows you kind of our mix of resources, and it's kind of a colorful map here, but it kind of shows you on the left-hand side of how we were generating resources. That gray line is coal. So a lot of coal in that 2005 timeframe. And you can see how that is going down significantly and going down completely to zero by 2035. So we'll be out of our coal plants by 2035. You can see the blue area right above that is natural gas, where it's kind of been filling in to take the space of the generation of the coal. Like I said, it's half as much emissions as coal, but it too has carbon emissions. So you can see how it's dwindling down to get to zero by 2050. You can see our yellow line there kind of stays consistent, is our nuclear generation, very clean, very reliable, very cost-effective energy. So we're going to continue to do that. We're going to extend the licenses and run those plants longer. And then you start seeing the dark green and the lighter green there on the right. That's what's going to come in the future to take the place of these generation sources that are going away. So you have renewables at the lighter green, which is solar, wind, batteries. And then you have, we love acronyms at Duke Energy. You guys like acronyms too. ZELFRs is a phrase that we came up with, which stands for Zero Emitting Load Following Resources. So these are resources that can run all day long, 24 hours a day, rain, shine, wind, doesn't matter. Some of those technologies are new nuclear. Small modular reactors are the technology that we're looking there, where it's smaller plants that you build in series. It's easier to build, but they generate cheap, safe, clean energy. We're also looking at hydrogen. So hydrogen, when it is burnt, the byproduct of hydrogen is water. So I think everybody in high school chemistry class stuck an electrode in a water with a test tube on top of it and put electricity in it, and then had the hydrogen gas bubble up in the test tube. Called electrolysis, but that's how we're going to make hydrogen. We're basically going to take energy, clean energy from solar and wind and nuclear, make it into hydrogen when we have excess of that power, and then we're going to use the hydrogen to burn in our combustion turbines that today burn natural gas. They'll be burning hydrogen in the future to be clean. So that's a dispatchable resource that we'll have. So you can see how that transitions. A lot of that technology happens post-2035. Nuclear plants are probably in that time frame. Wind is probably in that time frame. And then in the short term, it's going to be solar and batteries. And just to give you an idea of the magnitude of this, we're going to build 30,000 gigawatts of solar. That's a lot of solar. We're going to have more batteries just in the state of North Carolina in the next 10 years that exist today in the entire U.S. So that's a lot of batteries that are going to have to be put out of the system. So like I mentioned, the grid's got to be able to handle all that. We got to be able to build all that. And we'll talk about why right-of-ways and permitting and other items like that are important in the future. The last part of our strategy, which is really at the center of the strategy, is how we're going to bring our customers along, how we're going to exceed their expectations, make sure that they have what they want, which is reliable, affordable, and clean energy. And they've told us through several surveys and feedback that we get with them every month that we take surveys is they want control, they want to be told what's going on, they want options, and that's what we're giving them. You know, we're giving them tools to understand what's causing their bills to be what they are, how they can help, tips on how they can reduce their bills, tips on how they can reduce their carbon footprint. And we're doing a lot of things that we haven't done in the past, and their expectations have changed over the years. It used to be, you know, they would get a bill and they would get a notification that their lights went out by their lights going out, no other way. Now they get a text before they even have to call us that says, hey, we know your power's out, here's your estimated time of restoration. They get tools in their bills that help them. And this is their expectations have changed. If everybody uses Amazon, right? So Amazon came along and they would send you all these notifications of where your package was, where it was. They'll send you a picture that it's on your front desk, right, or on your front door. So it's like Christmas every day. When the package shows up, you know, you get excited, you see the thing at work, and you can run home and open it and see what it is, right? So that's kind of changed everybody's expectations. So we've had to change along the way. Some of the tools that I mentioned that we've developed for our customers are around energy efficiency tools. So every month our customers get a report that compares their usage to other homes in their neighborhood or other similar homes to them and shows them kind of like a little competition. Are you higher or lower than your neighbor? And here's some tips to get you back down so you can save money but also save carbon emissions by reducing your load, and here's how you can do it. Just recently we launched a carbon tool. So you can go on our website if you're a Duke Energy customer, you can plug in your address and you can see how much of your usage last year was clean. So when I did mine, I'm 59% carbon free. So I live here in Charlotte. We have a lot of nuclear plants, so a lot of times that's clean energy. Part of the day that we're using power is served by them. So you can see it also has tips on how you can move time of day usage to get to that cleaner part of the day when at night when the nuclear plants are creating more of the system load, or during the day when the solar is creating a lot of the generation. So these are going to be key tools in helping them have control of their power to make it cleaner, to make it more affordable for them. The other thing that we learned a lot during the pandemic, I think we all learned a lot during the pandemic in terms of how we work, but we really learned about our customers a lot and how they struggled through the pandemic, paying their bills. A lot of them lost their jobs temporarily. A lot of them had to do jobs differently. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of them were at home working, so their power became a bigger deal. They couldn't lose power because then they couldn't work or they couldn't teach their kids. So we set up a lot of different programs to help our customers during the pandemic, and now we're continuing those programs. So we set up a special team that works with our vulnerable customers, we call them, the ones that struggle to pay their bills, which really were impacted by the pandemic. How do we work with the government agencies that exist? And there's lots of government money out there, but like anything with the government, it's hard to navigate your way through that. A lot of paperwork, a lot of forms to fill out. So this team at Duke Energy now works with these vulnerable customers, helps them link together, helps them with their forms, helps them get through that bureaucracy a lot faster to get the money in their hands so they can keep their power bill on, keep their power on. So we helped receive over $200 million of that government aid and agency aid for our customers over the last 2 years, which has helped many, many families keep the lights on, help them with the situation they were in. Our Share the Light program, which is our company program, is taking money from our customers and from our employees and other foundation donations to help pay electric bills. That's $16 million a year that we, as customers, as employees, contribute to that fund that is helping our customers with their bills during the year. I mentioned our energy efficiency report that we get that becomes this competition every month. We've saved 24 million megawatt hours. By 2025, we will save 24 million megawatt hours by people not using energy, by having better light bulbs, by having better insulation, by swapping out HVAC systems. And to put that into context, that's 8 million tons of carbon that is not in the system because that energy is not being produced. That's the equivalent of almost 2 million cars on the road in terms of carbon emissions. So a big impact from those energy efficiency programs. And then finally, we track our performance by our J.D. Power surveys. And we've done a lot of work in this space. And last year, 4 of our 5 brands were top quartile. We're very proud of that, of how we've moved up in the rankings. And continue to delight in our customers is a key part of our strategy. So you can see there kind of how our scores have looked over the last few years. So that's kind of the underarching strategy for Duke Energy. So you may ask yourself, what in the world does any of this have to do with right-of-ways, environmental permitting, siting, trees? It's all tied together. Because the right-of-ways that we have are an important asset, and they're going to become more important as we build those 30,000 megawatts of power, that we build all these new facilities, that we site all this new battery storage places. So if you think about how many acres of land it's going to take to build this solar. So you see the statistic there, 7 acres of land roughly for 1 megawatt of solar. So we're going to be using between 10 and 15,000 acres a year to build solar. That's a lot of land. Most of that land is on the eastern side of North Carolina, on the northern side of Florida, in the middle, away from the cities in Indiana, in the cornfields. What do you need to do there is have right-of-ways that you can build transmission lines or upgrade transmission lines to be able to get that power where the load is. So there's a lot of land in eastern North Carolina, but there's not a lot of people that live in eastern North Carolina. So all that power will have to be generated and moved across the state to Raleigh and Charlotte, Asheville, and those areas. So that's either new right-of-ways or upgrading existing right-of-ways. So very, very crucial to what we're trying to accomplish as a strategy. You also think about the siting of those facilities, and the permitting of those facilities is going to be very crucial. A lot of stakeholders have opinions about these. The farmers love it because they're getting a better price per acre than some of their crops, but others don't want solar fields now, or they don't want windmills in their backyard. So how do you navigate through that? They definitely don't want transmission lines through their backyard, so how do you navigate that? So those are key things in how this all ties together as we move forward. We also have to maintain our current right-of-ways because, like I said, they're very important assets. They generate a lot of value for our company, and we got a lot of them. So a lot of vegetation, and there's several of our vegetation folks in the audience today. They know this. 21,000 miles of trimming every year. We remove 80 to 100,000 danger trees, as we call them. These are trees that are hazardous to our lines that have either been diseased or damaged from storms that are just going to fall over at any time. So a lot of work goes into that, applying herbicide, making sure that those right-of-ways stay clean so that we can maintain our lines and we can keep the trees off of our lines. We do a lot of partnering with agencies, and I'm sure some of these folks are in the room as well, but we're really proud that we're Treeline USA certified for 16 straight years. So we do a lot of work with our stakeholders, our cities, when they're planting trees, to make sure they're planting the right trees under our power lines so that we don't have to have issues with them later, but also that it gives them the aesthetics that they want. Like I said, we talk with stakeholders a lot. Everybody loves their trees. I love my trees, but they're not very good for power lines. So how do you reach that balance of being able to maintain your trees to keep the reliability up and also maintain your stakeholders there? We do a lot of work in our right-of-ways to help with pollination, with the species, growing the species. You heard about some of them this morning, milkweed, those are the type of things. So we've partnered with the Catawba Land Conservancy, University of Florida. We've done studies in our right-of-ways on what type of management of the right-of-way, what type of plants really drive the pollinators to come and be there. And these are important ecosystems of our world, because if you look around Charlotte, there's not a lot of natural areas left. It's all townhomes, houses, apartment complexes, buildings. But our right-of-ways is that environmental ecosystem where all the butterflies and bees can go and pollinate and do what they need to do. So it's very crucial to the whole ecosystem that we're working through here. I love the term butterfly highway. That's what it really is. They travel down these paths. This is the place that they can do what nature has taught them to do. And by the way we manage our right-of-ways is a very vital aspect to give this opportunity to keep this going. Milkweed, like I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of work, a lot of studies with some of the universities and how important these right-of-ways are to maintaining and growing those populations. I didn't realize how many bees there were, how many different types of bees. When I toured the University of Florida's lab where they're managing that, there was over 20,000 species of bees that they have found in our right-of-ways over the years. And they have, captured each one of them, and it's just amazing to see. And they're all different in terms of what they're looking for, but how they pollinate, what they're attracted to. But a lot of it is happening right there in our right-of-ways. The other big thing that trees and right-of-ways are near and dear to my heart and everybody's heart is around storms and reliability. So I mentioned Hurricane Ian, the 6th most powerful storm to hit the U.S., hit Florida a couple of weeks ago now, about 10 days ago. Very, very impactful storm. So this is a picture of one of our staging sites in Florida at the Villages, if those familiar with Florida. So that's 4,000 of the 10,000 people that we had down there. So I always thought this was a great picture because you can see the storm coming in and the people there ready to respond for it. But we've had to deal with a lot of damage from this hurricane and other hurricanes in the last few years. Like I said, they're getting more frequent, they're getting more powerful, and the right-of-ways play such an important role in keeping those lines clear so that we can restore power quicker, that we don't lose power, or when we do lose power, it's not as damaging as it has been in the past. And I'll give you an example. Just 5 years ago, Hurricane Irma hit Florida. Similar path, actually a little less powerful of a storm. We lost almost double the customers we lost this time. We had to replace almost 3 times the poles that we had to this time. So our vegetation programs, our grid programs that I mentioned earlier, they're making a difference. We were able to get people's power back on in 3 days versus 9 days during Hurricane Irma. So it's very important that we maintain these right-of-ways, very, very important that we make the investments in the grid to be able to have a robust and reliable system. The other thing that we're having to deal with is flooding. In North Carolina, in the last 25 years, since I've been with the company, we've had 3 500-year floods. And I always ask our meteorologists, how is that possible? I said, that's 25 years, not 500 years. So I thought we have one, and then 500 years, I won't have to deal with another one. 2 of these were within 3 years. So if you look at the picture there on the bottom right, that looks like a nice river, right? That's Interstate 40. That's not a river. So think about that. So these weather events are getting much, much more impactful. The substation on the left-hand side there, that was built to standards, 75 years ago. You can see that standard's not good enough anymore. So we're having to move those to higher ground. We're having to build walls around those to protect these that we never thought we had to do. So our standard used to be 150-year floods. Well, that's not good enough. So you can see some of the impact that we're dealing with. And then this is Hurricane Michael, which I think was the 2nd most powerful storm to ever hit the U.S. We're very fortunate that this hit where it hit, because if this had hit where Hurricane Irma or Hurricane Ian hit, or Hurricane Katrina, this was 160 miles an hour into the panhandle of Florida. So the panhandle of Florida, doesn't have as many people as Fort Myers or New Orleans or Tampa or Miami, but you could still see the devastation there. You can see the road just completely destroyed. There's not a power pole standing. We had to rebuild all those. When I went down there to tour the sites, this was in 2018, houses that were on the beach were now across the street from the beach, on top of the houses that used to be across the street from the beach. And that was 12-foot storm surge. Hurricane Ian had 18-foot storm surge in Fort Myers. So there's areas in Fort Myers that look just like this and maybe even worse. So much more powerful, makes us have to make sure that these right-of-ways, that these trees are addressed, that the poles are hardened in these areas, that we have the right materials, the right designs for flooding, those type of things. So a lot going on in that space. So I was going to open it up for any questions or comments that anybody may have. Y'all heard me ramble on here for enough, but be glad to answer any questions. And Tom, I don't know if we have a microphone to hear anybody, but.
I can be pretty loud.
Okay, and I'll repeat the question for everybody.
You talked about deploying more batteries just, I think, in North Carolina than are currently in the United States. And I'm assuming there's a whole
That's a great question. The question was around the supply chain for batteries. A lot of batteries going in. You hear about it in the news a lot of times about the supply chain issues. The problem with batteries right now is almost all the materials that go into them and all the manufacturing is in Asia. So that creates problems. So the good news is we're building a lot of plants in the U.S. There's been many announcements. There's one here in North Carolina. There's one in Georgia that's just opening up. Others are being built in Indiana and Ohio. So that'll get fixed. The materials, the raw materials, I think there's some work going underway to see about domestically sourced lithium, cobalt, those rare metals. But we're definitely looking at all that. We're also looking at new technologies. And this is Harry's opinion, but I think lithium is going to play a role in vehicles. And then what's going to happen on the grid is going to be a new technology. We're trying out what's called a flow battery, which is iron oxide technology that's being produced by Honeywell, which is another company based here in Charlotte. And we'll be testing that technology at our research and development center. We have a research and development center just outside of Charlotte where we can test all this new technology and make sure that it works before we scale it. So I think those are going to be longer duration. Right now, lithium batteries can go 2 to 4 hours. These batteries can go 10 to 24 hours. They can charge faster, discharge faster, not degrade when you do that. But they also don't catch on fire. That's the big issue with lithium. And you've seen all the pictures from Tesla's burning and the cargo ship in the Atlantic with all the electric cars that was burning and they couldn't put it out. So that is a definite risk with lithium. So we're looking at different technologies. We're also looking at, we announced a deal with Ford Motor Company about a month ago. The Ford F-150 Lightning it's the best-selling car for 44 years in the U.S. They can't make enough of them fast enough right now with people buying these, but the batteries on those are huge. They'll be able to power your home. What we're going to pilot with them is, can we use those batteries when they're not needed to power the grid and help everyone else? The statistic I always like to throw out is 100,000 of those Ford F-150 Lightnings. It's a gigawatt of power, which is a nuclear plant. I mean, that's a lot of power that's rolling around our highways. How can we tap into that when we need it? How can we use that? So those are the things that we're doing in battery space. Batteries are not going to really play a big major role for a few years, so we got a few years to figure that out. We are doing some batteries now, but really the big push for batteries is going to be in about 3 years from now. But great question.
Hi, Paul Martin with BSC. How does offshore wind figure into your future?
Yeah, that's another great question. So offshore wind is in our plans. We were successful in bidding and attaining the option to build a offshore wind facility off the coast of Wilmington, North Carolina. And there's another one that's been bought by Total Energy out of Spain, and then Avangrid, which is a northeast utility, owns one up towards the Virginia border. So these sites are going to be evaluated, studied, but we do have an option of building a facility there, about 1,600 megawatts, that'll come into service probably in the 2030 timeframe, 2032 timeframe. We still have a lot of things to work out with stakeholders. There's a lot of pushback from people on the coast. We have to make sure that it's outside the view shed. The transmission, you're talking about underwater transmission cables to get it on shore. Again, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the solar facilities are on the east side of North Carolina. The offshore wind is over there as well, and there's no load over there. So that is going to have to be built, new transmission built or upgraded right-of-ways built to bring the load back. So that's going to be a challenge as well. But it does play a big role. So solar is about 20% capacity factor, as we call it, which means it produces power 20% of the time. Wind is about double that, almost 50% of the time. So it's a little bit more reliable or a little bit more, covers more of the day. So those two technologies and batteries are going to be very crucial to the future. We are not doing anything at the time with that. I know the Europeans are doing a lot of that. We're watching that, but we have not done any of that. Again, transmission becomes a big problem for us, or how you get the power from that. So it adds a lot to the cost. I think the Europeans are closer to their load centers there on the coast, but we are looking at that. You got one in the back, Tom. These lights are so bright I can't see the hands.
Hi, John Brickley from TRC. How is the veg management work in regards to, say, hazard trees and cycle-based maintenance programs in the hazard trees that you mentioned? How is that work being identified and prioritized for, say, grid modernization or grid hardening?
Yeah, so I would say currently it's a little bit more of the brute force method with people out there putting eyeballs on it, helicopters, but we are moving more to LiDAR, satellite coverage, and trying to move to the digital age to where we can have better, clearer pictures of what our right-of-ways and what the danger trees are, or even growth rates. I know we're doing a lot of work in that space to where it becomes a little bit more digital. Where a satellite can show you, what the overhang is, what the growth rates are, those type of things. And then we'll have to work with our regulators. Our regulators are old-fashioned as well. They say you need to trim 5,000 miles a year, whether it needs it or not. And we want to move to the model of, well, we flew it, or we did LiDAR, or we did some satellite, and that doesn't need to be trimmed, but over here needs to be trimmed even though it's only been 3 years, because it's a different species, it grows faster, it's more impactful. So there's a lot of new technologies out there that we're excited about that we'll be able to identify and let us do things a little bit differently, make us more effective. The other thing in terms of grid modernization that we're doing is we're looking at it more holistically. We go through the substation and then everything that comes off of it, and we want to upgrade those systems, so we do a closer look at everything that impacts that entire substation and all the circuits that come off of it. In the past, we did more programmatic things where we'd replace poles, transformers. Here we're trying to tie it all together, and then tying the veg in with part of that as well. So a lot of cool stuff that's coming. We'll mention something else about satellites since I started talking about that. Not to deal with trees, but one of the slides I showed earlier is that we're going to be net zero in gas emissions as well. So gas lines for our gas customers, they have leaks. They release methane, which is much worse for the ozone than CO2 is, 20 times worse. We're using satellites today that can take pictures of our gas compressor stations or lines, and they can identify from space where we have methane leaks, and we can fix those faster than having somebody go out with a handheld trying to find a leak. So that technology is getting really good, and on the tree side, it's very similar as well.
Hey, thank you for your time. Will Anderson, ACRT. I had a question about the use of decentralized, more helix turbine systems as compared to an off-grid, more commercial scale system. Do you think that, has Duke done a comparative analysis of what a smaller scale on-land helix system would look like as compared to the offshore wind?
Yeah, we are looking at the smaller onshore wind type facilities. The big issue with onshore wind is even worse with the public sentiment around it. In the mountains of North Carolina where you have wind, there's a moratorium. You can't build anything on there, regardless of the size of it, whether it's the smaller helix type things or anything else. Then in the center of the state, you could probably do some of that, but there's not as much wind, so you run into that problem. So you got wind on the coast, wind on the mountains, not a lot of wind in the middle. Nobody wants it on the coast or in the mountains. They may take it in the middle, but it's not as good a resource. So I think that is going to change over time. When I travel in Europe, you see windmills, big ones, small ones, all over the place, on every mountain line, on every harbor. So I think that's coming, but it's going to take some time and some people to understand the benefits of it versus the negative parts of it.
In assessing reliability issues, are you looking at undergrounding more vulnerable parts of the system, even though it's a lot more costly?
Yeah, we are. As part of our grid plans, we call it targeted undergrounding program. So, you know, a lot of people, especially after storms, want everything undergrounded. That's not realistic. But where we have neighborhoods that don't let you touch their trees or fight you tooth and nail to cut their trees, we look at, can we put that underground? Because that's a targeted area. It's got reliability issues that are above and beyond others. So we're looking at that. You know, our right-of-way programs, our danger tree programs helps on the backbones and those other areas. So the targeted nature of undergrounding can help. Obviously, the new neighborhoods are pretty much all underground as they're being built, but we have a lot of old neighborhoods that it's not only is it not underground, but it's in people's backyards with lots of trees and hard to get to. You can't put a truck back there. So those are the prime candidates to put stuff underground. But it's about 10 times the cost. So you have to be very, very judicious with where the cost benefit is on that. Any other questions?
In regards to hydrogen, you know, they're doing a lot of studies on how much blending you can do with the natural gas, and you mentioned possibly having turbines that are 100% hydrogen fueled or whatever. I know GE just finished some tests where I think they got up to 40% blended mix or whatever with a turbine. How long do you think it is before, you know, you could replace natural gas even for you know, stoves or fireplaces, or all the way down to the residential level of natural gas replacement?
Yeah, I think, you know, the hydrogen, you know, the technology to burn it is not that difficult. I mean, I think the turbines that we have today probably can do 40 to 50%, like you mentioned. Some of the newer versions that Mitsubishi and others are building are 100% capable. So you know, that'll come with time. I'm not worried about that. The real tough thing about hydrogen is it's so expensive to make from green energy. They call it green hydrogen. So it's hydrogen that's made with clean source. They also have blue and gray hydrogen, which is made from ammonia and other sources, but it's creating more carbon than it's worth, plus it's 3 times the cost. So as we get more renewables, we'll be able to drop that price, and that'll come in line. And then the other issue is, where do you store it? So we're going to have plenty of renewables in the spring and the fall. So on a day like today outside, we're not using a lot of power. People haven't quite turned their heat on, although some of the southerners that feel like it's really cold today may have turned on their heat. But usually load's pretty low this time of year. So when you have solar in the levels that we're going to have, and you don't have anywhere to store it because batteries are only going to be able to store a certain amount of it and for a certain period of time, we're going to curtail those generation sources. We're going to have to scale back and not use that solar that's generated on a day like today. And that's the perfect time to use it to generate hydrogen. Because then that way you'll use it, you'll get a benefit for it. But you got to be able to store that hydrogen to use it in January when people are going to turn their heat on, or use it in July when it's 100 degrees. So there's a few technologies out there that people are looking at, but to store it in mass volumes, you have to have some geological formations. So down on the Gulf Coast, the salt mines, out in the west, some of the limestone formations. Here in North Carolina, we're not blessed with good geology. We do have some in Indiana that we could be able to store some. Florida doesn't have the greatest geology. So if you have to store the hydrogen that you make in North Carolina or in Indiana down on the Gulf Coast, then obviously you got to pipe it there, you got to pipe it back, that adds cost. You can't use the current pipes that we have for natural gas because hydrogen is more, it embrittles the current construction. So you're going to have to upgrade those pipes or line those pipes with something. So there's a lot of thinking that needs to go on there in terms of how you move it back and forth. And then in terms of getting it into the home, you know, I think that's probably further away. because of some of the dangers of hydrogen. You know, you see natural gas fires and explosions pretty regularly, but if you leave your pilot light on or your stove with hydrogen, then that becomes a bomb, basically. So, you know, there's going to have to be a lot of safeguards and a lot of thinking in that space when we get there. Well, I think we'll get there eventually, but the cost, the storage, the transportation are the real big things to figure out. I think the rest of it'll come, that'll be the easier part of it. Making it and burning it are the easy two things. You got one in the back there.
Yeah, just a quick question. With your goal of getting to net zero, I assume that has to include a replacement for SF6 gas, and I'm just curious what technologies you guys are looking at for that in your circuit breakers and stuff of that nature.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mentioned that methane's like 20 times carbon intensive, as intense as carbon for climate change. I think SF6 is like 50 or 100 times. Right now, the problem with replacing SF6 is there's not a substance that is as good of characteristics for what we need it for. So what we're focused on in the short term is two things. One, preventing leaks, making sure everything is as tight as possible, identifying those leaks quickly, and fixing those. And then we're working with EPRI, who's a research group, on what are the options. Is there a different type of breaker? Is there a different type of material? And there's a lot of work going on in that space, and I think we'll come up with something eventually. So we're focused on making sure we're not leaking it, and then we're looking at what the alternatives are. And you know, it is, you hear about it in the paper a lot, and it is very potent, but it is very, 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 very small amount of our emissions. I mean, it is almost lost in rounding how small it is, because there's just not that much of it. But we're addressing that in those two manners.
I think we got time for one more question.
Okay.
So I'm going to take you down a different path. Organizational behavior. You've got 28,000 employees. You have meetings in your C-suite. You have a set of goals that you're driving towards. How do you get that message to permeate throughout your organization and get down to the folks that are in the field so that they're aligned with what your goals are from a macro standpoint?
That is an excellent question. I think I'll answer it in a few ways. The first way I always say is communicate, communicate, communicate. Connect the dots for them. You know, it takes 7 times for people to hear it till it starts ringing, setting in. I think with these messages, because they're complicated, they're different than what they've been used to for 30 years, maybe 70 times that they have to hear it, and they have to connect the dots to see that. But more importantly, when you connect the dots, is everybody wants to know what it means for me. So if I'm working at a coal plant, it means something different than if I'm a line worker working on the grid. If I'm a line worker, life is good, right? We're spending a lot of money on the grid. It's such a vital part. We're gonna put batteries on the grid. We're gonna do all this stuff. But if I'm at the coal plant, all I hear is my plant's going away in 2028 or 2030. What am I gonna do? How am I gonna provide for my family? So that's a different message that we have to do that. And I'm proud of this, and I did a lot of work when I was in the coal group. Of those 53 units that we shut down, we didn't lay anybody off. We retrained them. We repurposed them. We put them in line worker roles. We put them in engineering roles. We put them in cybersecurity roles. So we've really taken a very thoughtful process of making sure that they know that we're going to help you. You know, we need you right now to continue to run that facility, but when the time comes, there's going to be other options. Now, the problem with some of that is some of these communities that we have these plants in are remote areas, so may not want to move. So how do we do that? But with remote work, I think we got some additional options now. So we're very focused on making sure we take care of our employees, give them other opportunities. But continuing to connect the dots and the messages for people is what's crucial in how we do that. And we have to do it for our customers as well. So, you know, we have some customers that want clean energy, some customers that don't that they just want reliable and affordable. So you got to continue to balance that message, because we're not going to be able to burn coal. Even if we wanted to burn coal, the companies that invest in coal mines and coal facilities aren't investing in them anymore. So no one's digging more coal. Even though we have plenty of coal in the country, nobody is digging it up. So at some point, even if you want to burn coal, you won't be able to buy it. So I think those are the messages that are important for customers. Those are the messages that are important for employees. So hopefully that answered your question. All right. Well, again, thank you for allowing me to come speak today. Like I said, I went all over the map because I couldn't talk about right-of-ways for an hour. So really appreciate being here, and just wanted to close with, we're focused on our strategy to be cleaner, more reliable, more affordable for our customers, and that's what we're going to do over the next several years, and I know we're going to be successful. And I really do appreciate what you guys do and bring to the industry, because it is going to be vital to getting us to the end point of where we want to go. So more right-of-ways, more permitting, more siting is going to be needed. So appreciate what you guys do every day. So thank you.
Harry, on behalf of the program committee, I want to say thank you for coming out and speaking with us today and talking to the group and entertaining us and educating us. The program committee sent Tom on an errand down to the Catawba Nation and picked up a piece of a 6,000-year history. It's probably not that old. There's a peace pipe in there for you.
Oh, cool. Cool. Very good.
Yeah, so thank you again.
All right,
Appreciate
thank you.
it.
All right. Harry, very informative. Thank you very much for all your insights and information you shared. Now I'd like to transition and invite our panelists as well as Carmen up to the stage. This is our opening plenary, and this was, Carmen gave a lot of, with some assistance from the steering committee, put a lot of thought into putting this plenary together. We believe it's going to help or keep you on your edge of your seat with engaging conversation over the crossroads where we are today, with our industry as well as society. If you think about it, our energy needs have never been higher, and there's a deep demand to not only maintain safe, reliable operation of our assets and infrastructure, improve resiliency, but as Harry mentioned, think about the transition of our reliance on current energy sources to more cleaner, renewable energy, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and other metrics that are in place. If you think about some of the recent global events that have taken place, it's put an acute focus on the importance of energy security, and these drivers of change are creating conditions that require the development of new right-of-ways. Though we may plan new right-of-ways, continues to evolve as far as how we do it and trying to work with all types of different stakeholders. Our panel today will be moderated by Carmen Holshoe, who's a principal environmental planner with our platinum sponsor, Jacobs. Please help give me a warm welcome to Carmen and our plenary panelists. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It is just so great to be in a room with a fantastic group of people that's passionate about environmental management of rights-of-way, and coming in from all over North America and from beyond as well. Really excited about this discussion today, so I'm going to just set it up for a minute here and then introduce each of our panelists, and we'll have a good and lively discussion. And as Harry has just talked about, we really are at this crossroads, just a tremendous amount of change that's happening in the energy industry. So many pressures, locally and globally, to decarbonize, to move energy to other parts of the world as well. And a lot of this really relies around managing rights-of-way, managing them well, building new rights-of-way, but not everybody wants new rights-of-way. So it's really about challenges and opportunities, and I'm delighted to introduce our panelists that are going to dive into this session and get us thinking about the topic. Really hope that this leaves you with some good fodder for discussion in our networking events at lunchtime and beyond, combined with all the great speakers that we're going to have this week. I'd like to introduce the panelists, starting with Randy Beltry. Randy is with Duke Energy. He's the Director of Transmission, Permitting, and Environmental Oversight. Randy brings over 25 years of experience siting and permitting transmission facilities. He has a BS in landscape architecture, and he's part of the siting, permitting, and engagement team, currently the Director of Permitting and Environmental Field Compliance for Duke Energy right here in Charlotte. Randy's had a great career so far, and he's received lots of awards and achieved a lot, and I'm going to just give you a short list of some of his achievements. The Duke Energy J.B. Duke Award for leading an effective resolution and siting a substation with effective collaboration of the Easter Band of Cherokees. The Citizen Award from the American Society of Landscape Architect for siting a major transmission line in the scenic North Carolina mountains. The Duke Energy Chairman's Award for siting and permitting a transmission line in western North Carolina. A published article in the Project Management Institute magazine, Engaging the Customer, concerning the siting of transmission facilities. He's received a conservation award from the Soil and Water Conservation Society for using innovative construction techniques to rebuild a transmission line in western North Carolina. He's received 2 first-place substation aesthetic awards from Electric Power and Light, and he was appointed by the governor to the North Carolina Sedimentation and Erosion Control Commission.
Thank you. That's what happens when you're as old as I am.
All right.